Chapter 1, Ashes in the Shaft. The detonation was not a clean rupture of stone and steel, it was a scream. The walls of the alien tomb convulsed as Kale's last charge tore into the blackened masonry, sending shards of obsidian-like fragments spinning through the voidlit chamber. The blast wave rolled outward, a pressure that seemed to bend the air itself, and for a heartbeat the silence fractured into chaos. Kale staggered back, his boots grinding against the slick, dust-coated floor. His visor's display flickered, static crawling across the edges of his vision. He could taste copper in his mouth, the acrid sting of blood mixing with the chemical tang of the explosive residue. His squad was scattered in the blast's wake, shadows of men and women hunched low, rifles raised, eyes wide with the raw edge of survival. The ascent shaft loomed ahead, impossibly tall, its walls ribbed with alien glyphs that pulsed faintly in the aftermath of the explosion. The inverted spire symbol burned brighter now, etched into the stone like a wound that refused to close, but the path was not clear. The blast had carved a jagged breach, yes, but beyond it the cold-eyed fighters still stood, their ranks broken yet unyielding, their forms flickering between flesh and shadow. And towering above them, untouched by the fury of Kale's charge, was the humanoid entity. Featureless, faceless, its body a monolith of pale stone-like flesh. The spire glyph glowed across its chest, a beacon of command. It raised its hand again, and the fighters surged forward, silent as the grave. "Form line," Kale barked, his voice raw but commanding. He slammed his shoulder against the nearest wall, bracing his rifle. "Suppressive fire, keep them off the breach." The squad obeyed with the desperation of soldiers who knew hesitation meant death. Sergeant Vera dropped to one knee, her heavy repeater roaring as streams of molten rounds carved arcs through the advancing shadows. Corporal Juno slid into position beside her, his breathing ragged, his left arm bound in a makeshift sling but his right hand steady on the trigger. The chamber erupted into a storm of muzzle flashes and ricochets. The alien fighters moved with unnatural precision, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark, their bodies absorbing punishment that would have shredded human flesh. They did not scream, they did not falter, they pressed forward step by step as if the void itself animated their limbs. Kale's mind raced. The breach was narrow, jagged, but it was a path. If they could hold the line long enough, if they could push through, the ascent shaft might offer escape, or at least a higher ground to die on. He forced the thought down. Survival was not a luxury here. Survival was a tactic. "Grenades," Kale shouted. He ripped one from his belt, thumbed the primer, and hurled it into the densest knot of shadows. The detonation was a thunderclap, a burst of light that carved silhouettes into the walls. Several fighters crumpled, their bodies dissolving into ash-like fragments that scattered across the floor. But the entity did not move. It watched, hand raised, as if orchestrating the slaughter with invisible strings. Kale's chest tightened. He could feel the whispers again, crawling at the edges of his mind. "You cannot escape, you are already ours." He clenched his jaw, forcing the voice back into the abyss. "Push forward," he roared, stepping into the breach. His boots crunched over alien debris, his rifle spitting fire into the advancing tide. Vera followed, her repeater blazing, cutting a swath through the shadows. Juno stumbled after them, teeth bared in a grimace of pain. The ascent shaft's base was close now, its walls rising like the throat of some colossal beast. Strange machinery lined its edges, alien conduits that pulsed faintly, veins of light running upward into infinity. The air was colder here, sharper, as if the shaft itself exhaled frost. Kale slammed his back against the wall, scanning upward. The shaft stretched beyond sight, a vertical abyss. No ladders, no platforms, only the faint suggestion of handholds carved into the stone. It was a climb meant for something other than human flesh. "Options," Vera growled, her voice cutting through the gunfire. Kale's mind churned. "We climb, one way or another." Juno spat blood onto the floor. "We'll be picked off before we're halfway up." Kale met his gaze, hard and unyielding. "Then we climb faster." The fighters pressed closer, their silent ranks filling the chamber. The squad's ammunition counters ticked downward, each shot a dwindling resource. Kale felt the weight of inevitability pressing against his chest. He raised his rifle, sighted on the entity. The faceless monolith stood unmoved, its hand still raised, its glyph burning like a star. Kale squeezed the trigger, unleashing a burst of fire. The round struck true, sparking against the entity's chest, but the glyph absorbed them, the light flaring brighter, mocking the attempt. The whispers surged again, louder now. "You cannot kill what is eternal," Kale snarled, his voice a ragged defiance. "We'll see about that." He turned back to his squad. "Vera, Juno, cover me." "I'm going for the shaft." Vera's eyes widened. "You'll never make it alone." "Then don't let me die before I try." He broke from cover, sprinting toward the shaft's base. The fighters surged to intercept, their movements unnaturally swift. Vera's repeater thundered, cutting them down in arcs of molten fire. Juno's rifle cracked, each shot precise despite his trembling arm. Kale reached the wall, his gloves scraping against the cold stone. He found the first handhold, jagged and alien, and pulled himself upward. His muscles screamed, his body battered and bloodied, but he climbed. The shaft swallowed him, its walls closing in, its glyphs pulsing faintly as if aware of his intrusion. Below the battle raged, his squad holding the line, their voices echoing in the chamber. Kale, Vera's voice was a roar, defiant and desperate. Don't you dare leave us in this tomb. Kale gritted his teeth, forcing his body upward. I'll find a way, he muttered, though the words were more prayer than promise. The entity's gaze followed him, its faceless head tilting slightly. The glyph on its chest flared, sending a ripple of energy through the chamber. The fighters pressed harder, their movements more frenzied, as if driven by the entity's will. Kale climbed, each handhold a battle, each breath a war. The shaft stretched endlessly above him, a path into darkness, into eternity. And below, the tomb of shadows consumed his squad, their gunfire echoing like the last heartbeat of humanity in the void. Chapter 2, The Ascent into Silence. Kale's breath rasped against the inside of his helmet, each inhalation a ragged scrape of air that tasted of copper and dust. His gloves clawed at the alien stone, fingers slipping into grooves that seemed carved not by tools but by something older, something that had never known human hands. The shaft was narrow, its walls pressing close, the faintly glowing glyphs pulsing like veins beneath translucent skin. Every pulse seemed to echo inside his skull, a rhythm that threatened to synchronize with his heartbeat, to claim it. Below the chamber was chaos. Vera's repeater spat molten arcs, the weapon's roar reverberating like thunder trapped in a coffin. Juno's rifle cracked in precise cadence, each shot a desperate punctuation against the tide of alien fighters. Their voices rose through the shaft, distorted by the stone, but Kale could still hear the raw defiance in them. Push them back, Vera bellowed, her voice a command that carried more weight than any rank. Kale gritted his teeth, forcing his body upward. His muscles screamed, his shoulders burned, but he climbed. The shaft stretched endlessly, a throat of stone swallowing him whole. He dared a glance downward, his squad was shrinking into shadows, their muzzle flashes like fireflies in a storm. The entity loomed above them, its faceless head tilting, the glyph on its chest flaring brighter. The fighters surged harder, driven by its will. Kale's mind whispered treachery, you're abandoning them. You're climbing into nothing while they bleed for you. He shook his head violently, sweat stinging his eyes. I'll find a way, he muttered again, though the words felt hollow, swallowed by the shaft's silence. The stone was slick, damp with condensation that smelled faintly of rot. His boots scraped against protrusions that seemed deliberately placed, as if the shaft itself invited ascent. Yet every handhold felt wrong, too smooth, too deliberate, as though it had been shaped for something not human. His gloves slipped, and for a heartbeat he dangled, weight tearing at his shoulders. He slammed his chest against the wall, gasping before forcing himself upward again. The glyphs pulsed brighter the higher he climbed. They were not random markings but patterns, sequences that shifted as if aware of his presence. He brushed one with his glove, and a ripple of light surged outward, crawling along the shaft like liquid fire. His helmet's HUD flickered, static crawling across the display. Kale, Juno's voice cut through, sharp, desperate. Don't stop, whatever's up there, it's the only chance. Kale swallowed hard, forcing his body upward. His mind replayed every scream, every burst of gunfire below. He imagined Vera's face twisted in fury, Juno's hands trembling as he reloaded, the squad's blood staining the tomb's floor. He climbed faster, driven by guilt as much as determination. The shaft narrowed further, forcing him to twist his body sideways, scraping his armor against the stone. His shoulder plates caught, grinding, and he had to wrench himself free with a grunt that tore at his throat. His breath fogged the inside of his visor, blinding him for a moment. He wiped it with his glove, revealing the glyphs ahead, now glowing so bright they painted his armor in ghostly hues. A sound rose from above, faint at first but growing, a low hum, resonant, vibrating through the stone. It was not mechanical, it was alive. Kale froze, his hand pressed against the wall, feeling the vibration crawl into his bones. His heart stuttered, his breath caught. Below, Vera roared again, her voice ragged. Kale, move. Don't you dare stop, he forced himself upward, each movement a battle against the weight of dread pressing down on him. The hum grew louder, layered with whispers that slithered into his ears, words he could not understand but felt in his marrow. His HUD flickered again, symbols appearing, alien glyphs overlaying his display, shifting, rearranging. Kale's mind reeled, it knows me, it sees me. His gloves found another handhold, jagged and sharp, cutting into the fabric. He ignored the sting, pulling himself higher. His boots slipped, scraping against the stone, but he did not fall. He would not fall. The shaft widened suddenly, opening into a chamber above. Kale hauled himself over the edge, collapsing onto the cold floor. He lay there, chest heaving, sweat dripping into his eyes. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in shadow, its walls lined with glyphs that pulsed in rhythm with the hum. The air was thick, heavy, tasting of iron and decay. He pushed himself to his knees, scanning the chamber. At its center stood a structure, a monolith of black stone carved with spiraling patterns that seemed to move when he looked directly at them. The hum emanated from it, a resonance that filled the chamber, that filled him. Kale staggered forward, drawn despite himself. His boots echoed against the stone floor, each step louder than it should have been. His hands trembled, his rifle hanging useless at his side. He reached the monolith, its surface smooth, cold, alive. He pressed his glove against it, and the glyphs flared, blinding him. A voice filled his mind, not spoken, not heard, but felt. It was vast, ancient, layered with tones that defied comprehension. You climb into eternity, you bleed into silence, you are seen. Kale gasped, stumbling back. His rifle clattered against the floor, the sound swallowed by the hum. His vision blurred, the chamber spinning. He dropped to one knee, clutching his helmet. Below, the gunfire faltered. He could hear it, fewer shots, fewer voices. Vera's roar was weaker now, Juno's commands strained. The fighters pressed harder, driven by the entity's will. Kale forced himself upright, his body trembling. He grabbed his rifle, raising it toward the monolith. His finger hovered over the trigger, but he hesitated. The voice pressed harder, filling his skull, drowning his thoughts. You are not enemy, you are vessel. His breath caught, his finger trembling. He lowered the rifle slowly, his mind screaming at him to fire, to destroy, but his body refusing. He staggered closer again, his hand reaching out despite himself. The glyphs flared once more, and the chamber shook. Dust rained from the ceiling, the hum rising to a roar. Kale's visor cracked, the HUD collapsing into static. He ripped the helmet off, gasping as the air burned his lungs. The monolith split open, its surface peeling back like flesh. Inside was darkness, deeper than shadow, deeper than void. It reached for him, tendrils of black smoke curling outward, wrapping around his arms, his chest. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed, devoured. Below, Vera's voice rose one last time, defiant, furious. Kale, don't you dare. The chamber consumed the words. The monolith consumed Kale, and the tomb of eternity whispered, its voice echoing through the shaft, through the chamber, through the void. Vessel found, vessel claimed. Chapter 3. The tomb's breath. The chamber was a wound carved into the bones of the world, its walls slick with condensation that smelled of rust and rot. The air was heavy, thick enough to choke, vibrating with the pulse of something not alive yet not dead. The monolith's split surface gaped like a maw, and from it poured the black vapor that had swallowed Kale whole. Vera staggered forward, boots grinding against shattered stone. Her rifle was slick with blood, her armor dented, but her eyes burned with fury. Kale, she bellowed, voice raw, echoing against the cavern walls. The smoke coiled around her legs, tugging, whispering. She fired into it, each shot a thunderclap, but the rounds vanished into the void as if consumed by water. Juno's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. Hold formation, cover the breach. His squad scrambled, half their number already gone, their bodies strewn across the jagged floor. The survivors raised rifles, their muzzles flashing, but the enemy was no longer flesh and bone. The tomb itself had become their adversary. Kale's scream had faded, replaced by silence. Then came the whisper, low, resonant, threading through every skull like a parasite. Vessel claimed, vessel bound. Vera's breath caught. She felt it inside her head, clawing at her thoughts, pressing against the fragile walls of her will. She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to move, to fight. She would not surrender him, not to this, not to the void. Push forward, Juno barked, his voice cracking under strain. He slammed a fresh magazine into his rifle, the motion mechanical, desperate. We breach that maw or we die here. The squad surged, boots pounding, rifles blazing. The smoke thickened, rising like a tide, swallowing their advance. Shapes flickered within it, elongated limbs, hollow eyes, mouths stretched too wide. They were not soldiers, not machines, not anything human. They were echoes, phantoms born of the tomb's hunger. One lunged, its body a smear of shadow. Private Harl screamed as it wrapped around him, dragging him into the black. His rifle clattered to the stone, his voice cut short. The squad faltered, horror freezing their limbs. Hold the line, Juno roared, his voice a whip. He fired into the phantom, the rounds sparking against nothing, vanishing into the dark. Their illusions, their lies, but the tomb's lies bled. Another soldier fell, his throat torn open by a shadow's claw. Blood sprayed across the stone, steaming in the cold air. Vera's rage boiled over. She charged, her rifle spitting fire, her boots hammering against the trembling floor. She reached the maw, the split monolith, and thrust her hand into the smoke. It burned like acid, searing her flesh, but she did not flinch. Kale, she screamed, voice breaking. Fight it, don't you dare give in. Inside the void, Kale drifted. His body was gone, dissolved into the black. He was thought, he was memory, he was vessel. The whispers coiled around him, soothing, commanding. You are chosen, you are bridge. He saw visions, worlds burning, fleets shattered, humanity broken beneath the weight of something vast and eternal. He saw himself at the center, a conduit, a weapon forged of flesh and void. It thundered, his mind fractured. No, he whispered, though his voice was swallowed. I am not yours. The tomb laughed, a sound without sound, a vibration that shook the marrow of his soul. You are already mine. Outside, Vera's hand closed around something solid, fingers trembling, slick with shadow. Kale's hand, she pulled, muscles straining, teeth bared. The smoke fought her, tendrils tightening, dragging him deeper. Help me, she roared. Juno was there in an instant, his gauntlets locking onto Kale's arm. Together they pulled, their boots sliding across the stone, their rifles clattering to the ground. The squad rallied, forming a chain, each soldier grabbing the next, their bodies straining against the tomb's hunger. The chamber shook, the walls cracking, dust raining down. The monolith's glyphs flared, blinding, their light searing into retinas. The whisper rose, furious now, a storm inside every skull. Vessel must remain. Vessel cannot be freed. Kale's body tore free of the void, collapsing onto the stone. His armor was shredded, his skin pale, veins blackened with shadow. His eyes snapped open, glowing faintly, not with life but with something deeper, something alien. Vera fell beside him, clutching his shoulders. Kale, talk to me, stay with me. His lips parted, his voice a rasp. It's inside me. Juno's face hardened, his jaw clenched. Then we cut it out. Kale's hand shot up, gripping Juno's wrist with unnatural strength. No, you can't. It's bound. If you kill me, it spreads. If you let me live, maybe I can contain it. The squad froze, their rifles trembling in their hands. The tomb's whisper echoed again, softer now, almost mocking. Containment is illusion. Vessel is truth. Vera's eyes burned with tears, fury and despair mingling. We'll find a way. We'll burn this tomb to ash if we have to. Kale's gaze locked onto hers, his voice low, urgent. Then hurry, because it's learning. Umi, the chamber roared, the monolith split, surface widening, the void spilling outward. Shadows surged, phantoms shrieking, their claws reaching. The squad raised rifles, their muzzles flashing, their voices rising in defiance. Juno barked orders, his voice steel. Form a perimeter, hold the breach. Vera, get him up, we move now. Vera hauled Kale to his feet, his body trembling, his eyes glowing. He staggered, his breath ragged, but he moved. The squad tightened around them, rifles blazing, boots pounding. The tomb screamed, its voice a chorus of whispers, its hunger unleashed. The chamber shook, the ceiling cracking, stone collapsing. And through it all, Kale heard the whisper inside his skull, softer now, intimate. You are mine, Vessel, you are mine. He clenched his jaw, forcing his legs to move, forcing his mind to resist. He would not surrender, not yet. The squad pushed forward, their formation tight, their rifles cutting through shadow. The chamber collapsed behind them, the tomb's maw closing, the whispers fading. But Kale knew the truth. The tomb was not gone, it was inside him now, and it would never let go. The hiss of failing ventilation fans was the only sound that clung to the stale air as the squad slipped through the jagged breach in the tomb's outer wall. Dust hung in thick, oily ribbons, catching the weak glow of their helmet lamps and turning each breath into a fight against grit that scraped the back of throats. Vera's grip on Kale's forearm was iron tight, her knuckles white against the pale skin of his sleeve. She could feel the tremor that ran through him, not just from exhaustion but from something deeper, a low thrum that seemed to pulse in time with the tomb's dying heartbeat. Keep your eyes forward, Juno barked, his voice a rasp filtered through the calm static. He moved ahead, boots splashing in shallow pools of some unknown viscous fluid that reflected the light like blackened mercury. Each step sent a shudder through the floor as if the stone itself resisted their passage, trying to pull them back into the dark maw they had just fled. Kale's vision swam at the edges, the world narrowing to a tunnel of light and shadow. The whisper inside his skull had softened to a sigh, but it was no less insistent. You are mine, Vessel. The words curled around his thoughts like smoke, slipping into the cracks of his resolve. He forced his jaw shut, feeling the grind of molars as he tried to bite back the invasive presence. Every heartbeat felt like a drumbeat urging him to surrender, to let the void flood his mind and become one with the ancient hunger that had slept beneath these stones for eons. Behind them, the tomb's roar had faded into a low, mournful groan, the sound of stones settling after a violent convulsion. Ceiling fragments lay scattered like broken teeth, some still glowing with a faint, eldritch luminescence that pulsed in rhythm with the alien monolith's fractured surface. Vera risked a glance backward, her eyes catching the way the darkness seemed to writhe, tendrils of shadow reaching out from the cracks as if probing for any sign of life. She swallowed hard, the taste of copper sharp on her tongue, and turned her focus to the man she was half carrying, half dragging. Stay with me, Kale, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the ragged breathing of the squad. You're not alone. Her words were a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. She hoped they anchored him enough to keep the tide at bay. Juno halted at a junction where three corridors diverged, each swallowed by blackness that swallowed light whole. He raised his hand, signaling a pause. The squad fanned out, rifles at the ready, forming a ragged semicircle. The air grew colder, a palpable chill that seeped through their armor plating, making the hair on Vera's arms stand on end. She could see her own breath fogging in the beam of her lamp, a ghostly plume that vanished almost as soon as it formed. Listen, Juno said, low and urgent. The tomb's not just stone, it's alive. It's reacting to us, to the resonance we bring. Whatever S in there, it's learning. It's using Kale as a conduit. He flicked his gaze to the young man, eyes narrowed, searching for any sign of the alien influence breaking through. If we can't cut the link, we'll have to cut him loose. Kale's head snapped up, eyes flashing with a sudden, terrifying clarity. The glow in his irises had intensified, a sickly violet that seemed to drink the light around them. "No," he rasped, the word raw and torn from his throat. I won't let it use me." He clutched at his temples as if trying to physically squeeze the intrusion out. Sweat beaded on his forehead, mixing with the dust that clung to his skin, creating streaks of grime that ran down like tears. Vera felt a surge of adrenaline, fierce and protective. She shifted her weight, planting her boots firmly against the slick floor, and leaned into Kale, sharing her balance. "We'll get you out," she promised, her voice steadier than she felt. "We'll find a way to sever whatever's hooked into you. But you have to fight it, Kale, you have to stay with us." A sudden, sharp crack echoed from the left corridor, a section of ceiling giving way under the strain of the tomb's shifting mass. A slab of stone crashed down, sending a spray of shards and dust into the air. The squad flinched, rifles jerking up as instinct took over. Juno shouted, "Cover, move left," and the team surged, boots pounding against the uneven ground, each step a calculated risk as they navigated the falling debris. The right corridor yawned like a throat, dark and inviting, but Vera's instincts screamed danger. She caught sight of a faint glyph etched into the wall near the entrance, a series of interlocking triangles that pulsed with a soft, inner light reminiscent of the monolith's markings. It was alien, yet somehow familiar, as if it were a warning left behind by those who had built this tomb eons ago. "Hold," she called out, her voice cutting through the panic. "That glyph, it's a seal. If we can trigger it, maybe we can shut down whatever's feeding off Kale." Juno's eyes flicked to the symbol, then back to Kale, whose breathing had grown labored, each inhalation a ragged gasp that seemed to pull the whisper closer to the surface. "Do it," he ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Vera, you and Kale get to that glyph. The rest of us will hold the line." Vera nodded, shifting her grip to support Kale's weight more securely. She guided him forward, her movements deliberate, each step measured to avoid destabilizing the fragile floor. As they approached the glyph, the air grew thick with a low hum, a vibration that resonated through the soles of her boots and up into her bones. The whisper inside Kale's skull rose to a fevered pitch, a chorus of alien voices overlapping, each one promising power, oblivion, eternity. "Kale, look at me," Vera urged, locking her gaze onto his. The violet glow in his eyes flickered, momentarily wavering as if caught between two worlds. "Focus on the glyph, think of the squad, think of home, think of anything but whatever this is." She reached out, her gloved hand hovering over the carving. The stone was cold, yet it seemed to thrum with latent energy, like a dormant beast waiting for a cue. She pressed her palm flat against the surface, feeling a subtle shift, a click, almost imperceptible, as if a latch had disengaged. A surge of light blossomed from the glyph, a brilliant azure that washed over the corridor, pushing back the encroaching shadows. The whisper in Kale's mind faltered, stuttering as the light struck it like a blade. He gasped, his body arching as the alien presence recoiled, the violet flare in his eyes dimming to a dull, exhausted amber. "Now," Juno shouted, his voice reverberating off the stone walls. The squad opened fire not at the tomb but at the fissures in the walls where the darkness seemed to coalesce into writhing shapes. Plasma bolts lanced out, searing the stone and sending sparks flying. Each impact sent a shockwave through the corridor, the stone shuddering as if in pain. Vera felt the glyph's power surge through her, a wave of cool clarity that washed over her mind, pushing back the fog of terror. She could sense the tomb's awareness, an ancient, patient intelligence flinching as the seal reactivated. The walls shuddered, stone grinding against stone, and a deep, resonant groan echoed from the very heart of the structure, a sound like a giant exhaling after millennia of holding its breath. Kale slumped against her, his breathing ragged but steadier. The whisper was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness that felt both relief and loss. He looked at her, eyes wide and vulnerable, the alien glow now nothing more than a memory of fire. "We did it," he whispered, voice hoarse. We sealed it for now." Vera tightened her hold, feeling the weight of his trust settle upon her shoulders. "We'll keep it sealed," she replied, her voice firm despite the tremor in her own chest. "We'll get you out, we'll get all of us out." Juno jogged over, his expression a mix of grim satisfaction and lingering wariness. "Good work," he said, clapping a hand on Vera's shoulder. "But we're not out of the woods yet, the tomb's still shifting. We need to find the main exit before it decides to collapse on us." They moved as a unit, the squad reforming with renewed purpose. The corridor ahead, now illuminated by the glyph's afterglow, stretched forward like a promise. Shadows still clung to the edges, but they seemed less hungry, more wary of the light that now pulsed from the seal embedded in the wall. As they pressed on, the tomb's whispers faded into the background, a distant echo that no longer clawed at Kale's mind. Yet Vera could not shake the sensation that something watched them from the dark, a patient intelligence waiting for the moment their guard slipped. She kept her rifle at the ready, her senses sharp, every creak of stone, every drip of unknown fluid a potential threat. The march continued through the alien mausoleum, each step a testament to human stubbornness against a cosmos that cared little for their survival. The Tomb of Eternity had shown its teeth, and they had answered with steel and resolve. But deep within the stone, the void stirred, dreaming of the day when its vessel would finally be wholly its own. Until then, the scavengers of the void pressed on, hearts pounding, rifles hot, and minds clenched against the whisper that would never truly fade. Chapter 5. The maw of silence. The corridor narrowed into a throat of stone, its walls slick with condensation that smelled faintly of iron and rot. The squad slowed, boots crunching against fractured tiles that had once been polished smooth, now scarred by centuries of collapse. Kale raised a clenched fist, halting the line. His visor's HUD flickered with static, the tomb's interference gnawing at their comms. Eyes sharp, he growled, voice low but carrying the weight of command. This place doesn't want us here. Vera adjusted her grip on the rifle, the weapon's matte black casing reflecting the faint pulse of the glyph light behind them. Her breath fogged inside her helmet, each inhale a reminder of the recycled air that kept them alive. She scanned the walls, alien carvings spiraled upward, jagged and deliberate like wounds carved into flesh. They seemed to writhe when her gaze lingered too long. Juno stepped forward, his heavy frame moving with surprising grace. He knelt, running a gloved hand across the floor. Tracks, he muttered, not ours, fresh. The squad tensed, Kale's jaw tightened. Human, Juno shook his head. Too wide, too deep, whatever made these, it's heavier than us. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. Somewhere in the dark, stone shifted with a groan like a leviathan turning in its sleep. The squad's formation tightened instinctively, rifles raised, barrels sweeping arcs across the corridor. Forward, Kale ordered, slow and deliberate. No chatter unless it's life or death. They advanced, each step measured, the sound of boots echoing like gunshots in the tomb's hollow lungs. The corridor opened into a chamber vast enough to swallow their entire squad 10 times over. The ceiling arched high above, lost in shadow, supported by pillars carved into grotesque forms, elongated figures with hollow eyes and mouths stretched in eternal screams. Vera's stomach twisted. She forced herself to keep moving, rifle steady. Her mind whispered treachery. What if the tomb is alive? What if it's watching? She crushed the thought, focusing on the rhythm of her breath, the weight of the weapon in her hands. Kale raised his hand again, signaling halt. His visor scanned the chamber, HUD flickering with ghostly outlines. Movement, he hissed. Left flank, the squad pivoted, rifles snapping toward the shadows. For a heartbeat, nothing stirred, then something shifted, a ripple in the dark like liquid shadow peeling itself from the wall. Contact, Vera barked, squeezing the trigger. Her rifle spat fire, muzzle flash illuminating the chamber in staccato bursts. The round struck the shadow, tearing fragments of black mist that dissolved into the air. The thing recoiled, its form half seen, elongated limbs, a torso that bent unnaturally, a face that was no face at all. It moved with a predator's grace, silent, swift. Suppressing fire, Kale roared. The squad unleashed a storm of bullets, the chamber erupting in thunder. Sparks flew as rounds ricocheted off stone, the alien pillars shuddering under the assault. The creature darted between cover, impossibly fast. Juno cursed, firing a burst that clipped its leg. It stumbled, shrieking, a sound that wasn't sound, but a vibration that rattled their bones and clawed at their minds. Vera's vision blurred. She felt the whisper again, stronger now, a voice inside her skull. Leave, leave, leave. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to focus. Kale, it's trying to break us. Kale's voice cut through the chaos, iron and unyielding. Hold the line, anchor formation. The squad shifted, backs to each other, rifles outward, a circle of steel against the void. The creature lunged, claws slashing, but the formation held. Bullets tore into its body, shredding shadow into fragments. It collapsed, dissolving into mist that seeped into the cracks of the floor. The chamber fell silent once more, save for the ragged breaths of the squad. Juno spat inside his helmet, voice trembling with fury. What the hell was that? Kale's gaze swept the chamber, hard and calculating. Not human, not machine, something else, something this tomb was built to contain. Vera's hands shook as she reloaded, the metallic click echoing louder than it should. If that was just one, what else is waiting? Kale didn't answer. He turned toward the far end of the chamber where a massive door loomed. It was carved from obsidian, etched with glyphs that pulsed faintly like veins filled with dying light. That's our way forward, he said, but it's locked. Juno, Vera, cover me, I'll breach. He approached the door, scanning its surface. The glyphs writhed under his touch, reacting to human contact. A low hum filled the chamber, vibrating through their bones. Kale, Vera's voice was tight. It feels wrong. Everything here feels wrong, Kale snapped, but we don't have a choice. He pressed his palm against the central glyph. The hum deepened, the door trembling as if resisting. Then with a grinding roar it began to open. Beyond lay a corridor darker than the void itself. The air that spilled out was colder, sharper, carrying the scent of ancient dust and something metallic, blood perhaps, though older than humanity itself. Kale turned to his squad, eyes hard. "We move, stay tight, stay alive." They entered the corridor, swallowed by shadow. The walls here were smoother, polished, reflecting faint glimmers of light from their visors. Strange symbols lined the passage, shifting subtly when viewed from different angles. Vera's pulse hammered. She felt eyes on her, though the corridor was empty. The whispers returned louder now, a chorus of voices layered atop one another. "You should not be here, you are prey, you are dust." She clenched her jaw, forcing herself to march. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of defiance. Juno's voice crackled over comms, strained. "Kale, I think the tomb's changing again. The walls, they're closer than they were." Kale glanced back. He saw it too, the corridor narrowing, stone shifting subtly as if the tomb itself sought to crush them. "Double time," he barked. "Move." The squad broke into a jog, boots pounding against the floor. The corridor constricted, walls grinding inward with a sound like grinding teeth. Dust rained from above, choking the air. Vera stumbled, caught herself, pushed forward. Her lungs burned, her muscles screamed, but she kept moving. Survival was a rhythm, a mantra. One step, one breath, one shot. They burst into another chamber, smaller but no less terrifying. At its center stood a monolith, towering, jagged, carved from black stone that seemed to drink the light. Around it lay corpses, human and alien alike, desiccated husks frozen in poses of agony. The squad halted, weapons raised. The monolith pulsed faintly, a heartbeat of stone. Kale's voice was a whisper now, heavy with dread. "The tomb of eternity, this is its heart." The whispers surged, overwhelming, a tide of voices clawing at their minds. Vera screamed, dropping to one knee, clutching her helmet. Juno staggered, rifle shaking in his grip. Kale forced himself forward, every step a battle against the weight pressing down on him. He raised his rifle, aiming at the monolith. "Whatever this is," he growled, "we end it here." The chamber trembled, the monolith's pulse quickening. Shadows stirred at the edges, rising once more. The tomb was awake, and it would not let them leave without blood. The squad braced, rifles ready, hearts pounding. The battle for survival had only just begun. Chapter 6, The Tomb Awakens. The chamber's air thickened, heavy with the stench of rot and ozone. Monolith's pulse reverberated through the walls, a rhythm that seemed to sync with the squad's own heartbeats, dragging them into its cadence. The black stone drank the light, its jagged edges shimmering faintly as if slick with oil. Every shadow stretched unnaturally long, bending toward the squad like grasping fingers. Kale's boots scraped against the dust-choked floor as he advanced, rifle raised, jaw clenched. His voice was low, guttural, the tone of a commander who knew fear but refused to bow to it. "Form up." Tight wedge, no gaps, the squad obeyed, instinct overriding terror. Juno staggered into position, his rifle trembling, sweat dripping from his brow beneath the helmet. Vera forced herself upright, her breath ragged, eyes wide as the whispers clawed at her mind. She bit down hard on her lip until she tasted blood, grounding herself in pain. The corpses scattered around the monolith seemed to twitch in the dim light, desiccated husks, human and alien alike, frozen in grotesque poses of agony, mouths open in silent screams, limbs twisted unnaturally. Their eyes, hollow sockets, seemed to follow the squad's movements. "Eyes sharp," Kale growled. "They're not just dead." The chamber trembled again, dust cascading from the ceiling. The monolith's pulse quickened, each throb sending a vibration through the floor that rattled their bones. Then the shadows moved. They peeled themselves from the walls, stretching, elongating, forming shapes that were almost human but wrong in every detail. Limbs too long, heads too narrow, torsos bending at impossible angles. Their movements were jerky, spasmodic, like marionettes pulled by unseen strings. "Contact," Vera screamed, raising her rifle. The squad opened fire. Muzzle flashes lit the chamber in staccato bursts, bullets tearing into the shadow things. But instead of flesh, the rounds struck smoke and darkness, dispersing them only for the forms to reconstitute, stronger, closer. Juno cursed, his voice cracking. "They don't drop, they don't drop." Kale's response was a roar. "Suppress. Keep them back." The chamber became a storm of gunfire, the squad's rifles barking in desperate rhythm. The shadows surged forward, their movements accelerating, their forms solidifying with each pulse of the monolith. They reached for the squad with clawed hands, fingers like blades of obsidian. One lunged at Vera. She sidestepped barely, its claws raking across her shoulder plate, leaving deep gouges in the armor. She spun, firing point-blank into its chest. The shadow dissolved into smoke, shrieking in a voice that wasn't sound but thought, a scream inside her skull. Her knees buckled. She forced herself up, teeth bared. "They're in our heads." Kale's eyes narrowed. He fired a controlled burst into another shadow, then barked orders over the chaos. "Juno, flank left, Vera anchor right, keep the wedge tight." We pushed forward toward the monolith. The squad obeyed, dragging themselves into formation through sheer will. They advanced step by step, rifles blazing, shadows clawing at them from every angle. The monolith loomed larger, its pulse now a thunderous beat that shook the chamber. Juno's voice cracked through the comms. "We're walking into the heart of this nightmare." Kale snarled back, "Better the heart than the throat. Move." The squad pressed forward. Each step was a battle, each breath a war. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices, pleading, mocking, commanding. They spoke in languages the squad didn't know yet somehow understood. Promises of power, threats of annihilation, memories twisted into lies. Vera's vision blurred. She saw her brother, long dead, standing among the corpses, reaching for her. His lips moved, whispering her name. She faltered, rifle lowering. Kale's hand slammed against her shoulder, dragging her back. His voice was iron. Not real, not him. Focus. She blinked, tears burning her eyes, and forced the hallucination away. Her rifle rose again, her finger tightening on the trigger. The monolith's surface rippled. Symbols carved into its jagged face began to glow, lines of crimson light snaking across the stone. The chamber's tremors intensified, the floor cracking beneath their boots. Juno shouted, panic edging his tone. It's waking up, we're feeding it. Kale's response was a growl, primal and unyielding. Then we starve it, concentrate fire on the monolith. The squad shifted, rifles snapping toward the towering stone. They unleashed a torrent of gunfire, bullets hammering into its surface. Sparks flew, shards of black stone splintering off. The crimson glow faltered, flickered. The shadows screamed, their forms convulsing, weakening. Vera's voice was raw, desperate. It's working. Keep firing, but the monolith fought back. The glow surged, brighter, blinding. A wave of force erupted from its core, slamming into the squad like a physical blow. They were thrown back, crashing into the corpses, weapons skittering across the floor. Kale hit the ground hard, the breath ripped from his lungs. He forced himself up, vision swimming, ears ringing. His rifle lay meters away, but his knife was still strapped to his thigh. He drew it, the blade gleaming in the crimson light. The shadows closed in, shrieking, clawing. Kale rose to his feet, knife in hand, eyes blazing with defiance. We don't die here, he snarled, not in this tomb. Not like them. Vera crawled to her rifle, fingers trembling as she gripped it. She rose, blood streaking her face, and stood beside Kale. Juno staggered to his feet, his rifle shaking but steady. The squad formed up again, battered but unbroken. The monolith's glow intensified, its pulse now a deafening roar. The chamber shook violently, cracks spiderwebbing across the walls. The corpses began to rise, their desiccated forms animated by the crimson light. Kale's voice was a command, a battle cry. Hold the line, we burn this nightmare down. The squad opened fire once more, rifles blazing, shadows shrieking, corpses lurching forward. The chamber became a maelstrom of chaos, gunfire, screams, whispers, tremors, and through it all, Kale's voice thundered, unyielding, defiant. Push forward, into the heart, into the void. The tomb of eternity had awakened, and the squad would either conquer it or be consumed. The copper tang of burnt flesh and stale ozone coated the back of Kale's throat, so thick he could taste the rot of the reanimated corpses still twitching at the edge of the chamber. Each breath burned like he'd inhaled broken glass, dust from the cracking stone ceiling caked in the lines of his throat, his lungs screaming from the sprint that had carried them through the monolith's pulse. His left pauldron was dented so far inward the jagged edge dug into his shoulder through the Kevlar weave underlay, a hot, throbbing bruise already spreading across his collarbone. The serrated blade of his knife was crusted with dried gore, and a sliver of desiccated rib he'd pried loose from a corpse that lunged at Vera 10 seconds prior. He wiped it clean on the tattered uniform leg of a dead ASF scav, the fabric stiff with congealed blood that had dried to a rust-brown crust weeks, maybe months ago. Vera knelt over another corpse 3 meters away, her gloved fingers fishing through the dead man's cargo pockets with an efficiency born of a dozen dead-end scav runs. Her left bicep was laid open to the bone, a tear from a shadow's claw that she'd wrapped in a scrap of her uniform when the fighting had started, the cloth already soaked through with dark, slow welling blood. She pulled a dented canister of combat stims from the corpse's vest, held it up to the monolith's bleeding crimson light to check the fill level, then tucked it into her own pouch. The earpiece of her comms rig sparked intermittently, a crackle of static cutting through the distant shrieks of the shadows still darting along the chamber walls, too skittish to close in after the squad had poured 3 magazines apiece into their ranks. MOS at 40% across the board, she said, not looking up from the corpse's pack where she was fishing for a spare power cell for her scanner. Juno's rotary cannon's got 1 full cell and a half-empty backup. I've got 2 clips for my rifle in the stims. Medkit's empty. We're running on fumes. Juno leaned against a pile of rubble at the squad's rear, his 30-pound rotary cannon propped against his thigh. The barrel was still glowing faintly orange at the tip, the power cell he'd swapped out 10 seconds prior, already warm enough to singe the fabric of his glove. A scar split his jaw, a souvenir from a bar fight back on Ceres Station, and he picked at it with his free hand while he ran a diagnostic on the cannon's feed. My arm's got a claw gash in it too, he said, nodding to the raw, weeping tear in the armor of his left bicep. Stims'll keep it from seeping for another hour, but after that I'm useless with the cannon. Might have to switch to sidearm. He nodded to the monolith, its pulse now a deafening thud that vibrated through the stone floor and up the soles of their boots, cracks spiderwebbing faster now, chunks of stone raining down from the ceiling every few seconds. We push into that pit now, or we get buried here. Your call, Kale. Kale's gaze lingered on the locket strapped to his armor under his chest plate, the metal warm against his skin from the monolith's heat. It held a faded hollow of Lyra, his sister, grinning with a bottle of rotgut in one hand and a stolen ASF patch in the other, taken 3 days before she'd vanished on the scav run that had led the squad to this tomb. He'd spent 6 months chasing the coordinates she'd slipped to him in a dead drop, 6 months of dodging ASF patrols and rival scav crews just to get here. He wasn't leaving without answers. He wasn't leaving without her if she was still here. We push, he said, his voice rough, gravelly from the gunfire and the dust. No more pausing. We get to the bottom of that shaft, we find out what the hell this place is, and we burn it to the ground if we have to. Move out. The squad fell in behind him, boots splashing through the slurry of gore and melted plastic casings that coated the floor. The shaft yawned at the far end of the chamber, a black maw lined with iridescent black metal carvings that glowed faintly crimson in time with the monolith's pulse. The whispers had never stopped, not since the first corpse had risen, but now they were louder, sharper, winding around the edges of Kale's thoughts like cold fingers. He could make out words now, half buried under the static. Kale, Lyra, come home. He shook his head hard to clear the noise and tightened his grip on his knife. Hallucinations, the tomb messing with their heads. He'd heard the stories, the warnings old scavs whispered in the bars on the rim. The void didn't just kill you, it talked to you, showed you the things you wanted most just to make you let your guard down. Halfway across the chamber, a hand shot out from under a pile of corpses, clamping around Vera's ankle. She didn't scream, didn't even stumble. She kicked the corpse in the jaw with the steel toe of her boot, the skull cracking with a wet crunch, then put a round through its temple without breaking stride. Juno laughed harsh and sharp as he put 2 plasma rounds into a pair of corpses that had risen behind Kale, the searing heat turning them to ash in seconds, the smell of burnt flesh mixing with the ozone so thick it made Kale's eyes water. Nice kick, he yelled over the thud of the monolith's pulse. Remind me not to get on your bad side. They hit the edge of the shaft and looked down, and Kale's breath caught. It wasn't a pit. It was a shaft cut so deep the bottom was lost in shadow, lined with platforms spaced every 10 meters down, each connected by a narrow set of stairs carved into the metal. The whispers were pouring up from the bottom, so loud now they made his teeth rattle, and he could swear he heard Lyra's laugh, clear as day, for half a second before it vanished under the thud of the monolith. Vera held up her scanner, the screen flashing so bright it illuminated her pale, blood-streaked face. There's a structure at the bottom. Power signatures off the charts. Nothing in the ASF database comes close. This isn't a tomb, it's a facility. Maybe a generation ship buried here before the void even had a name. She paused, her throat bobbing as she swallowed hard. I'm also picking up human life signs, dozens of them, all at the bottom. Same biosignature as the missing ASF squads from the last 6 months. Kale's jaw tightened. He'd known the squads had come here, had seen their wrecked shuttle half buried in the dust 3 clicks out from the tomb entrance, but he'd told himself they'd crashed, died of exposure, anything but this. Stairs, he said, already stepping onto the first landing, his knife still raised. Juno, rear guard, Vera middle, keep your scanners up. If anything moves, you burn it. The stairs were slick with a clear, slimy residue that made their boots squeak on the metal. The walls of the shaft lined with more of those sarcophagi, each carved with the same wide-eyed screaming face they'd seen in the corridor earlier. Every few steps one would slide open silently, and a small, spindly alien creature with iridescent blue skin and star-bright eyes would scurry out, chittering softly before darting past them down the stairs, vanishing into the dark below. Vera's scanner beeped every time one passed, her brow furrowed. They're not aggressive, neural signatures are calm. What the hell are these things? Scavengers, probably, Juno muttered, putting a round into a shadow that had tried to dart down the stairs after them, the shadow dissolving into black smoke before it could reach the bottom. This place has been here longer than humans have been flying ships. Something's been living here the whole time. They were halfway down when the shaft went dark. The monolith's crimson light cut out abruptly, replaced by the faint blue glow from the sarcophagi lining the walls. The whispers stopped too, so sudden the silence rang in Kale's ears. He froze, his knife raised, his head tilted to listen. For half a second he could have sworn he heard Lyra's voice clear as day right behind his ear. Turn back, Kale, it's not worth it. He shook his head again harder, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. Hallucinations, the tomb was playing mind games. He keyed his comms, his voice low and sharp. Vera, status. Juno, you still with me? Still here, Vera said, her voice tight like she was fighting to stay focused. Power's still on, just not the monolith. The sarcophagi are powering up now. All of them, I'm reading thousands of active neural signatures, not just the ones at the bottom. I'm good, Juno said, the hum of his cannon loud in the dark. Just wish whatever turned the lights off would turn him back on. I hate walking in the dark. They kept going, the blue glow of the sarcophagi the only light, the air growing colder the lower they got, until they hit the bottom of the shaft and stepped out onto a platform, and Kale's breath caught in his throat. The chamber was vaster than the entire ASF Scav ship they'd arrived in, the ceiling lost in shadow, dotted with thousands of tiny blue lights that looked like stars. The floor was polished black, so reflective it looked like they were standing on the edge of the void itself, no visible bottom. In the center of the chamber, a dais carved from the same iridescent black metal as the shaft rose 30 feet in the air, and atop it sat a throne carved from a single block of glowing blue crystal. And sitting on the throne was a figure, humanoid but easily 3 meters tall, its skin the same iridescent blue as the small scavenger creatures, its eyes closed like it was sleeping. Before Kale could raise his hand to signal the squad to hold, the figure's eyes snapped open, glowing bright, bloody crimson, the exact same shade as the monolith's light. The hum that had been building in the base of Kale's skull cut out abruptly, replaced by a silence so deep he could hear the thud of his own heartbeat. The figure's voice echoed all around them, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once, layered with the whispers that had followed them the whole way down, so loud now he could make out every word. You have come to plunder the tomb of eternity, the resting place of the Ethel. You will leave with nothing. You will become part of the chorus for all eternity. Kale stepped forward, his knife raised, his voice sharp and defiant, even as his hands shook a little. We didn't come to plunder. We came to find out what happened to our people. The ASF squads that disappeared here. Where are they? The figure tilted its head like it was amused, and the blue light of the chamber shifted to crimson, matching the glow of its eyes. They are part of the chorus. They beg to join the eternity, to escape the pain of their short, meaningless lives. You will beg to join them too. It is your purpose. Behind them, the sarcophagi they'd passed on the stairs slid open all at once, the sound of sliding metal echoing through the chamber so loud it made Kale's ears ring. Figures stepped out, dozens of them, all in tattered ASF armor, all with the same blank black eyes as the shadow creatures, all holding rifles and knives and plasma cutters, their faces twisted into silent screams. Kale recognized the patch on the first one's armor, a wolf's head the same as Lyra's old squad. His stomach turned. Juno racked the bolt on his rotary cannon, the hum of the power cell loud in the charged air, and grinned, sharp and feral. Well, shit. Looks like we're not leaving without a fight. Kale glanced back at Vera, who was already raising her rifle, her face set in a hard, determined line, the gash on her arm forgotten. He looked back up at the throne, at the alien guardian that thought it already owned them, and he grinned, too, the knife in his hand glinting in the crimson light. Good, I was getting tired of running. Let's give these bastards a show they'll never forget. The metallic shriek of the sarcophagi sliding open still echoed in Kale's skull, a high, keening ring that drowned out the thud of his own pulse for a full 3 seconds. The chamber's blue bioluminescence bled out in waves, replaced by a thick, blood-crimson glow that bled from the walls, the throne, the very pores of the basalt floor under their boots. The air, once cold and sterile, sharp with the tang of recycled ship air and alien mineral, now reeked of sweet, rotting honey, copper blood, and the acrid bite of ionized plasma. The veins that had snaked up the walls in lazy blue loops now pulsed like exposed arteries, each beat casting wavering red shadows that made the dozens of newly opened sarcophagi look like gaping, toothless mouths. Juno's rotary cannon hummed so loud Kale could feel the vibration of its power cell humming through the soles of his boots, up his shins, settling in his teeth. The big man's knuckles were white where he gripped the weapon's foregrip, his jaw set in a feral, teeth-baring grin that didn't reach his eyes. He shifted his weight, boots scuffing the ichor-slicked floor, the brass casings from his last burst of fire glinting at his feet, still warm enough to singe the fabric of his cargo pants if he stood still too long. Left flank 3 o'clock, he barked, his voice cutting through the ringing in Kale's ears, rough with the gravel of a dozen bar fights and too many nights breathing recycled air in cramped drop ship holds. Vera, get your ass up on that sarcophagus rim, you got the high chapter 9. The tomb awakens, the chamber's crimson pulse seemed to throb in time with Kale's heartbeat, each beat a hammer blow against the inside of his skull. He crouched low, rifle braced against his shoulder, the matte black barrel trembling as his muscles fought to steady themselves against the tremors of fear and adrenaline. The sarcophagi that lined the walls were no longer inert stone coffins. They were breathing, flexing, their surfaces rippling like the skin of some colossal beast. The sound was faint but unmistakable, a wet sucking inhale, followed by a rattling exhale that carried the stench of rot and ozone. Eyes up. Juno's voice was a thunderclap, his rotary cannon spitting a burst of tracer fire into the shadows above. The rounds sparked against the basalt ceiling, showering the squad in glowing fragments. Movement on the high rim. Vera vaulted onto the lip of a sarcophagus, her boots skidding on the slick ichor that oozed from its seams. She steadied herself with one hand, the other raising her long-barreled marksman rifle. Her visor's HUD flickered, struggling to parse the shifting forms in the gloom. She cursed under her breath, a sharp hiss of frustration. They're not registering, no heat signatures, no mass readings. It's like they're ghosts. Kale's throat tightened. Ghosts. That was exactly what they looked like, shadows peeling themselves free from the walls, their outlines jagged, unfinished, as though reality itself resisted their presence. He squeezed the trigger, sending a burst of plasma bolts into one of the shapes. The rounds passed through, dispersing into the crimson haze without impact. "They're not ghosts," muttered Lieutenant Eric, his voice low, guttural, like gravel grinding under steel. He stepped forward, his armor plates clicking into place as his exosuit adjusted for combat stance. "They're projections, the tomb's defense system. Don't waste ammo unless you see flesh." As if summoned by his words, one of the shadows solidified. Its form coalesced into a towering figure, skeletal yet armored, its limbs elongated into cruel, blade-like appendages. The crimson glow reflected off its carapace, revealing inscriptions etched into its surface, alien runes that writhed and shifted, refusing to be read. "Contact," Juno roared, unleashing a torrent of fire. The rotary cannon's barrels spun into a blur, the chamber filling with the deafening roar of kinetic death. The rounds tore into the creature, chunks of black ichor spraying across the floor. It staggered but did not fall, its body knitting itself back together with obscene speed. Kale's stomach lurched. "It's regenerating, then aim for the core," Eric barked, pointing to the creature's chest, where a faint, pulsating light glimmered beneath its armor. "Center mass now." Kale adjusted his aim, his hands slick with sweat inside his gloves. He fired, each shot a desperate prayer. The plasma bolt struck the glowing core and the creature convulsed, its scream a piercing shriek that rattled the chamber walls. It collapsed, dissolving into a puddle of steaming ichor that hissed as it seeped into the basalt floor. For a moment silence reigned. The squad's ragged breathing filled the void, each inhale sharp, each exhale trembling. Then the sarcophagi began to open. One by one the stone lids slid aside, revealing the horrors within. Figures rose, their bodies a grotesque fusion of flesh and machine, their faces hidden behind masks of bone and steel. Some carried weapons that hummed with alien energy, others wielded claws that dripped with corrosive fluid. The chamber's crimson glow intensified, bathing the squad in a hellish light. "Form up," Eric commanded, his voice cutting through the rising panic. Kale left flank, Juno suppressing fire. Vera picked targets and dropped them before they close. Kale moved, his boots slipping on the ichor-slick floor. He pressed his back against a sarcophagus, rifle raised, eyes scanning for threats. His pulse hammered in his ears, drowning out the distant hum of alien machinery. He caught sight of one of the creatures advancing, its movements jerky, unnatural, as though it were a puppet pulled by invisible strings. He fired, the plasma bolt striking its head. The mask shattered, revealing a face beneath human. Kale froze. The eyes that stared back at him were milky, lifeless, but undeniably human. The skin was stretched taut, veins bulging with crimson light. The mouth opened, a guttural moan escaping, half human, half alien. "They're us," Kale whispered, horror clawing at his throat. "They're human, not anymore," Eric growled, cutting the creature down with a burst from his rifle. "They're husks, the tomb's puppets, don't hesitate." But Kale did hesitate. His finger trembled on the trigger, his vision blurring as the realization sank in. These weren't just alien constructs, they were human scavengers, consumed, repurposed, turned into weapons by whatever force haunted this tomb. The chamber erupted into chaos. Juno's cannon thundered, mowing down waves of husks, each kill punctuated by a spray of ichor and bone fragments. Vera's rifle cracked, precise shots dropping targets before they could close the distance. Eric moved like a machine, his exosuit amplifying his strength, each strike a brutal execution. Kale fought, but his mind was fractured. Every face he saw carried echoes of humanity, eyes that once saw, mouths that once spoke, hands that once held. He fired, but each shot felt like betrayal, each kill a wound carved into his soul. The husks pressed harder, their numbers overwhelming. The squad fell back step by step, their boots splashing through pools of ichor. The crimson glow pulsed faster, the chamber's heartbeat accelerating as though the tomb itself hungered for their blood. "Fall back to the throne," Eric ordered, his voice a whip crack. We make our stand there. They retreated, the throne looming ahead, its surface slick with ichor, its runes glowing brighter with each passing second. Kale stumbled, his shoulder slamming against the basalt wall. He raised his rifle, firing blindly, his vision tunneling. Then he heard it, a whisper, soft, insidious, curling into his mind like smoke. "Kale," he froze, his rifle lowering. The voice was familiar, achingly so. It was his sister's voice, long dead, lost in the void during a scavenger raid years ago. "Kale, join us," his knees buckled. The chamber spun, the crimson glow blurring into streaks of blood. He clutched his helmet, screaming, trying to drown out the voice. Eric grabbed him, shaking him hard. Focus, soldier, it's the tomb, it's in your head, fight it, Kale gasped, his lungs burning. He forced his eyes open, staring into Eric's visor. The lieutenant's gaze was steel, unyielding, a lifeline in the storm. Kale nodded, teeth clenched, forcing the whispers back into the abyss. The squad reached the throne, forming a defensive circle. The husks closed in, their claws scraping against the basalt, their moans echoing like a funeral dirge. Juno's cannon roared, Vera's rifle cracked, Eric's commands cut through the chaos. Kale raised his rifle, his hands steady now. He fired, each shot deliberate, each kill a defiance against the tomb's whispers. The chamber shook, the crimson glow flaring, the sarcophagi trembling as though enraged. And then from the throne itself, a figure rose, taller than any husk, its body a fusion of alien and human, its face hidden behind a mask of shifting runes. Its eyes glowed with crimson fire, its presence suffocating, oppressive. The tomb guardian, the squad froze, their weapons lowering instinctively. The guardian raised its arms, the runes on its body blazing, the chamber's pulse reaching a fever pitch. Kale's breath caught. The whispers returned, louder now, a chorus of voices, human and alien, merging into one. You cannot leave. You are ours. The guardian stepped forward, each movement shaking the chamber, each step a declaration of inevitability. Kale tightened his grip on his rifle, his jaw set. The fear was still there, gnawing at his bones, but beneath it burned something else, defiance. We're not yours, he whispered, his voice trembling but resolute. The guardian's eyes flared, the chamber erupting into a storm of crimson light, and the battle for the tomb truly began. Chapter 10. The chamber was alive with fury. Crimson light pulsed from the walls like veins filled with molten blood, each beat hammering against the squad's skulls. The basalt floor trembled beneath their boots, cracks spidering outward from the throne as though the tomb itself rejected their intrusion. Kale's breath rasped inside his helmet, fogging the visor for a heartbeat before the filtration system cleared it. His rifle was raised, the barrel steady, but his mind was a storm. The whispers clawed at him, voices layered upon voices, human anguish braided with alien syllables that bent the edges of sanity. You are ours, you cannot leave. The tomb guardian advanced, its height dwarfed them, its limbs elongated and armored in plates that shimmered with runes shifting like liquid metal. The mask was a lattice of symbols, each glowing, each rearranging in patterns that made Kale's eyes ache. Behind it, the fire of its gaze burned crimson, twin suns of hatred and inevitability. Circle tight, Eric barked, his voice a whip crack. He planted himself at the center, his command presence anchoring the squad against the tide of fear. Weapons up, controlled fire, do not break formation. Juno's cannon roared, the recoil slamming into her shoulder as she unleashed a stream of tungsten rounds. The shells struck the Guardian's chest, sparking against the rune armor, ricocheting into the chamber walls. The Guardian staggered not at all. It raised one arm and the runes flared. A wave of force erupted outward. The squad was thrown back, boots skidding across basalt, bodies slamming into sarcophagi that rattled and cracked. Kale hit the ground hard, pain lancing through his ribs, but he rolled, rifle still clutched tight. Suppressing fire, Vera's voice was sharp, desperate. Her rifle spat bursts of plasma, streaks of blue-white light cutting through the crimson haze. They struck the Guardian's mask, searing against the runes, but the symbols only shifted faster, absorbing the energy, twisting it into new configurations. The husks surged forward, emboldened by their master's presence. Their claws scraped, their moans rose into a chorus that merged with the whispers. Kale fired, each shot deliberate, each kill a defiance. A husk's skull shattered under his round, another collapsed as his bullet tore through its chest. He moved with precision, his fear transmuted into cold focus. Kale, Eric's voice cut through. Left flank, hold it. Kale pivoted, boots grinding against basalt, rifle snapping to the left. 3 husks lunged, their bodies jerking with unnatural speed. He fired 1, 2, 3, each shot finding its mark. The husks fell, twitching, their moans fading into silence. The Guardian raised both arms now. The runes blazed, the chamber's pulse reaching a fever pitch. The sarcophagi trembled violently, lids cracking, dust spilling into the air. From within, skeletal forms stirred, ancient remnants twitching as though awakening. Contact multiplying, Vera shouted, panic edging her voice. We're going to be overrun, Eric's jaw clenched. Juno, heavy fire on the Guardian. Vera, Kale, keep the husks contained. We hold this ground or we die here. Juno braced, her cannon roaring again, the chamber filling with thunder. The rounds hammered against the Guardian's torso, sparks flying, runes flaring brighter. The Guardian stepped forward unshaken, each movement shaking the chamber. Kale's heart pounded. The whispers pressed harder, drilling into his skull. You are ours, you cannot leave. He gritted his teeth, forcing the voices back, forcing his focus onto the target. He fired, his shots striking the Guardian's mask, the runes shifting faster, almost frantic. Eric, Kale shouted over the chaos. The runes, they're absorbing everything. We need to break the pattern. Eric's eyes narrowed. He scanned the Guardian, his tactical mind racing. Target the gaps, aim for the joints, break the symmetry. Copy, Vera snapped, adjusting her aim. Her rifle spat plasma into the Guardian's knee joint, the energy searing into the exposed flesh beneath the armor. The Guardian staggered, its movement faltering for the first time. Juno seized the moment, her cannon roaring, shells slamming into the same joint. The Guardian's leg buckled, its massive frame shifting, balance compromised. Kale's breath caught. It can bleed. The husks shrieked, their chorus rising into a frenzy. They surged harder, claws scraping, bodies slamming against the squad's formation. Kale fired, his rifle cracking, each shot a lifeline. He moved with precision, his body a machine of defiance, his mind a storm held in check by sheer will. The Guardian roared, a sound that shook the chamber, a sound that was not human, not alien, but something in between, a fusion of agony and rage. It raised one arm, the runes blazing, and a spear of crimson energy erupted, lancing across the chamber. The beam struck a sarcophagus, shattering it, obliterating the skeletal form within. The fragments scattered, burning the air filled with ash. The squad ducked, the beam slicing overhead, scorching the basalt. Move, Eric commanded, his voice iron. Keep mobile, don't give it a fixed target. They shifted, boots pounding against basalt, formation fluid but tight. Kale moved with them, his rifle snapping to targets, his shots precise. The husks fell, one after another, their bodies collapsing into silence. The Guardian advanced, its movement slower now, its leg dragging, but its presence no less suffocating. The runes blazed, the chamber's pulse hammering. Kale's mind raced, break the symmetry, break the pattern. He scanned the Guardian, eyes locking onto the mask. The runes shifted, rearranging, absorbing energy, but there, at the center, one symbol remained constant, unchanging. Eric, Kale shouted. The mask, center rune, it's stable, that's the core. Eric's eyes snapped to it. He nodded, his jaw set. All fire on the mask, break the core. The squad shifted, weapons raised, fire converging. Juno's cannon roared, Vera's rifle spat plasma, Kale's shots cracked. The rounds hammered into the mask, the plasma seared, the runes flared violently. The Guardian staggered, its roar shaking the chamber. The mask cracked, fragments splintering, the stable rune flickering. Kale's breath caught, it's working. The husks shrieked, their frenzy reaching a peak. They surged harder, bodies slamming against the squad, claws scraping, moans rising. Kale fired, his shots precise, his movements fluid. He was a storm contained, a defiance embodied. The Guardian raised both arms, the runes blazing, the chamber erupting into a storm of crimson light. The sarcophagi shattered, skeletal forms collapsing, the air filled with ash. The mask cracked further, the stable rune flickering violently. Eric's voice cut through, iron and fire. Push, break it, break the core. The squad unleashed everything. Juno's cannon roared, Vera's rifle spat plasma, Kale's shots hammered. The mask shattered, fragments exploding, the stable rune flickering once more before collapsing into silence. The Guardian roared, its body convulsing, the runes flaring violently before dimming. It staggered, its massive frame collapsing, the chamber shaking as it fell. The whispers faltered, their chorus breaking, their voices fading. You are ours, the words dissolved into silence. Kale's breath rasped, his body trembling, his rifle clutched tight. He stared at the fallen Guardian, its body twitching, its runes dimming. Eric's voice was iron steady. Hold formation, watch for movement, this isn't over. The chamber was silent now, the crimson light fading, the whispers gone. The squad stood, weapons raised, breaths heavy, bodies trembling. Kale's eyes locked onto the fallen Guardian. His jaw set, his grip tight. Beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, burned something else, defiance. We're not yours. Chapter 11, The Tomb Breathes. The silence was not silence at all. It was a suffocating pressure, a weight that pressed against the eardrums, a void that seemed to hum with unseen currents. The chamber's crimson glow had faded into a dull, bruised twilight, the fractured runes etched into the walls pulsing faintly like dying embers. Dust hung in the air, thick and metallic, coating tongues and throats with the taste of rust and old blood. Kale's boots scraped against the stone as he shifted his stance, rifle raised, eyes locked on the fallen Guardian. Its massive frame twitched once, then stilled, the runes across its body dimming into nothing. He could feel his pulse hammering in his throat, the tremor in his hands barely contained by sheer will. Eric's voice cut through the haze, low and commanding. Form up, defensive arc, no gaps, the squad obeyed. Juno swung her cannon into position, its barrel glowing faintly from the last barrage. Vera crouched low, her plasma rifle steady, eyes scanning the shadows. Kale moved to the flank, his rifle's scope sweeping across the chamber's jagged edges. The chamber itself seemed alive. The walls breathed faintly, stone shifting with a sound like bone grinding against bone. The sarcophagi that had shattered now lay in ruin, skeletal fragments scattered across the floor, their ash drifting upward as though drawn to some unseen current. Juno muttered, voice harsh, feels wrong, like it's waiting. Kale's jaw tightened. He could feel it too, the sense that the battle had not ended, that the Guardian's fall was only a prelude. His eyes flicked to the mask fragments scattered across the floor, each shard glowing faintly, runes flickering like dying stars. Eric stepped forward, his boots echoing against the stone. He raised his rifle, barrel aimed at the Guardian's chest. Kale, Vera, sweep the perimeter. Juno, cover the core. If it stirs, you burn it. Kale moved, his body taut, every step deliberate. He swept his scope across the chamber's edges, the shadows deep and shifting. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, veins of crimson light threading through the stone. He felt the whispers pressing against his mind, faint now but insistent. We are not gone, we are beneath. He clenched his teeth, forcing the voices back. His rifle tracked movement, ash drifting, fragments shifting, but nothing alive. Yet the sense of presence was overwhelming, as though the chamber itself was watching. Vera's voice came through the calm, sharp movement. North wall, ashes rising. Kale swung his rifle, scope locking onto the far wall. The ash was indeed rising, drifting upward in a slow spiral, coalescing into faint shapes. Skeletal outlines flickered, then dissolved, only to reform again. Eric barked, hold fire. Wait for confirmation. The ash thickened, forming into a vague humanoid silhouette. Its eyes glowed faintly, twin embers in the void. The whispers surged louder now, pressing against Kale's skull. You broke the shell, the tomb breathes, the void remembers. Kale's finger tightened on the trigger. His breath came ragged, his heart pounding. He wanted to fire, to shatter the thing before it could solidify. But Eric's command held him back, iron discipline forged in countless battles. The silhouette dissolved suddenly, ash scattering like smoke. The chamber shuddered, a deep rumble echoing from beneath the floor. The runes along the walls flared once, then dimmed, their light flickering erratically. Juno cursed, her cannon shifting. It's not dead, it's bleeding into the stone. Eric's eyes narrowed. He lowered his rifle slightly, scanning the chamber. This isn't a tomb, it's a conduit. Kale felt the words strike deep. A conduit for what? The whispers pressed harder, their chorus rising. Eternity, hunger, you open the gate. The floor cracked suddenly, fissures spreading outward from the Guardian's body. Crimson light spilled upward, bathing the chamber in a sickly glow. The Guardian's chest convulsed, runes flaring violently, its body twitching once more. Eric roared, fire. Burn it down, the squad unleashed hell. Juno's cannon thundered, plasma bolts slamming into the Guardian's chest, tearing through stone and rune alike. Vera's rifle spat streams of searing plasma, carving into its limbs. Kale's shots hammered precise, each round striking glowing runes, shattering fragments of light. The Guardian convulsed, its body tearing apart under the barrage. But the fissures widened, crimson light spilling upward, the chamber shaking violently. The whispers rose into a scream, a chorus of countless voices. You cannot kill what is eternal. Kale's breath rasped, sweat dripping down his face. He fired again and again, each shot precise, each movement fluid. But beneath the fury burned something deeper, defiance. He would not yield, he would not belong to them. The Guardian's body collapsed finally, torn apart, fragments scattered across the floor, but the fissures continued to widen, the crimson light intensifying. Shapes began to rise from the cracks, skeletal forms, twisted and broken, their eyes glowing faintly. Eric's voice was iron. Fall back, controlled retreat, keep formation. Kale moved, his rifle sweeping, shots precise. Vera covered the flank, plasma bolts tearing through the rising forms. Juno's cannon roared, each blast shaking the chamber. The fissures spread further, the chamber trembling, dust raining from the ceiling. The whispers surged, their chorus deafening. You are ours, you open the tomb, you cannot leave. Kale's jaw set, his grip tight. He fired again, his shots hammering into the skeletal forms, shattering them into ash. His body trembled, exhaustion pressing hard, but his defiance burned brighter. Eric's voice cut through, steady and commanding. We hold until extraction, no collapse, no surrender. The squad moved as one, their formation tight, their fire relentless. The chamber shook, the fissures spreading, the crimson light blazing. The whispers screamed, their voices a storm. Kale's eyes locked onto the fissures, onto the rising forms. Beneath the fear, beneath the exhaustion, burned something else, rage. He would not be theirs, he would not fall to the void. He raised his rifle, his voice a growl. We're not yours. The words cut through the storm, defiance embodied. The squad's fire roared, their movements precise, their formation unbroken. The chamber trembled, the fissures blazing, the whispers screaming. And yet, beneath it all, the tomb breathed. The void waited. The battle was not over. The air tasted of ionized rust and burnt ozone, each breath a rasp that scraped Kale's throat as he drove the butt of his rifle into the sternum of a skeletal revenant that lunged from the fissure's yawning maw. Bone shards exploded outward, glittering like black glass in the crimson wash that bled from the tomb's heart. The fissure itself was a wound in reality, a jagged seam of violet-black light that pulsed in time with the whispers, each throb sending a shudder through the stone floor and up the soles of his boots. Dust fell in slow, lazy spirals, catching the light and turning the chamber into a grotesque cathedral of ash and flickering ember. hold the line. Eric's voice cut through the cacophony, a blade of command that seemed to slice the very sound waves. His gauntleted hand slapped the side of his helmet, the visor flashing a brief, angry red as he sighted down the barrel of his pulse carbine. Plasma licked the edge of a rising form, searing the necrotic flesh away in a hiss that sounded like a dying star. The recoil jarred his shoulder, but he kept the weapon steady, eyes never leaving the shifting horizon of bone and shadow. Cale felt the weight of his own exhaustion press against his ribs like a second skeleton, each inhalation a struggle against the pressure building in his chest. Sweat traced hot paths down his temples, mixing with the grime that had caked his skin since the first breach. Yet beneath the fatigue burned a feral spark, a refusal to let the void claim him. He squeezed the trigger, and the rifle's report cracked like a thunderclap, sending a salvo of kinetic rounds into the nearest apparition. The impact drove the creature backward, its limbs flailing as it disintegrated into a cloud of silicate dust that hung momentarily before being sucked back into the fisher's maw. To his left, Vera's plasma cannon spat searing bolts that carved arcs of white-hot light through the gloom. Each discharge illuminated the alien glyphs etched into the walls, symbols that pulsed with an inner luminescence, shifting like living tattoos whenever the whispers crescendoed. She shouted over the roar, her voice raw but unyielding, "Keep your heads down, they're feeding off the fear, don't let them get inside your skull." Her eyes, enhanced by the neural overlay of her combat visor, flicked constantly between the advancing horde and the fisher's throbbing core, calculating trajectories, predicting where the next wave would erupt. Juno's heavy cannon, a relic of old-world artillery retrofitted with gravitic stabilizers, boomed with each shot, the concussive wave rattling the stalactites that hung like daggers from the ceiling. The recoil forced her to brace against a broken column, her shoulders trembling under the strain. "We're buying time," she growled, more to herself than to anyone else, feeling the vibration of the weapon travel up her arms and into her marrow. "If we can keep them busy long enough for the evac to lock on," the extraction point, a narrow service shaft lined with reinforced alloy, lay 30 meters ahead, its mouth yawning like a black throat waiting to swallow them whole. A faint blue beacon pulsed at its entrance, the signature of the ASF dropship's homing signal, intermittent and flickering as the tomb's interference warped the transmission. Every few seconds the beacon stuttered, then flared back to life, a stubborn heartbeat refusing to be snuffed. Eric barked again, his tone edged with the desperation of a commander who knew the cost of failure. "Fall back to the shaft, maintain fire, no one gets left behind." He moved with a predator's grace, his boots finding purchase on the slick stone as he slipped past a collapsing archway, his carbine spitting controlled bursts that turned the advancing horde into a shower of ash and sputtering plasma. Cale's mind drifted, unbidden, to the briefing room back on the Ark, sterile, humming with the low thrum of the ship's drive core, the faces of his squad illuminated by holo maps of the sector. He remembered the commander's warning: the Tomb of Eternity is not a relic, it's a wound. Those who disturb it become part of its hunger. At the time, the words had felt like academic caution, a footnote in a dossier. Now they were a mantra hammered into his skull with each whispered echo that slithered through the fissure. "You are ours. You open the tomb. You cannot leave." He forced the thought aside, focusing instead on the immediate geometry of battle. A skeletal warrior, its ribcage flared like a grotesque cage, lunged from a fissure tendril that had snapped free, its claws scraping the stone with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. Cale pivoted, bringing his rifle to bear just as the creature's jaw snapped shut inches from his face. The butt of the weapon caught the creature's chin, snapping its head back with a crack that reverberated through his bones. He followed with a 3-round burst, each projectile finding purchase in the hollow eye sockets, the impacts causing the creature to implode inward, its mass collapsing into a vortex of dark dust that was instantly drawn into the fisher's hungry maw. Beside him, Vera's visor flashed a warning, an overload spike in her plasma coil. She gritted her teeth, feeling the heat build at the base of her weapon, and fired a sustained stream that carved a trench of molten rock across the floor, sealing off a branching fissure that threatened to spew another wave. The molten rock hissed as it met the cold air, releasing a plume of sulfurous vapor that made Cale's eyes water. He blinked away the sting, his vision swimming for a moment before the HUD cleared, highlighting the shifting positions of the enemy in red outlines. The chamber itself seemed to breathe. The walls, composed of an unknown alloy that absorbed and re-emitted light, throbbed in sync with the fisher's pulse, expanding and contracting like a living lung. Glyphs flared brighter with each expansion, casting shifting shadows that made the silhouettes of the attackers appear and disappear like phantoms in a strobe light. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of countless voices overlapping in a language that pressed against the edge of comprehension, each syllable a cold needle probing the thin membrane of sanity. Eric's voice rose above the din, hoarse but unyielding. Juno, lay down, suppressing fire on the east flank. Vera, keep the western seal hot. Kale, you're with me. We're pushing for the shaft. He slammed his palm against the side of his helmet, activating a burst comm that cut through the interference. Echo 6, this is Ash Leader. We need evac now. Repeat, we need evac now. A crackle of static answered, then a voice, strained but recognizable. Ash Leader, this is Falcon 2. We're holding at the extraction vector, bearing 090, altitude 12 meters. Hold tight, we're coming in hot. The promise of the dropship's engines, a low, throbbing thrum that would soon crescendo into a roar, sent a surge of adrenaline through Kale's veins, sharpening his focus. He surged forward, shoulders squared, rifle tucked tight against his chest. Each step sent vibrations through the stone, resonating with the fisher's pulse, as if the tomb itself were testing his resolve. A skeletal legion surged from the darkness, their numbers seemingly endless, each one a macabre mosaic of bone and alien sinew, their eye sockets glowing with an eldritch violet light that matched the fisher's hue. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, limbs bending at impossible angles, yet their intent was singular, to drag the living back into the stone womb. Kale fired in rhythm, a practiced cadence honed by countless drills in zero-gravity ranges and urban kill houses. The rifle's report was a sharp bark, each round finding a gap in the ribcage or snapping a spinal vertebrae. The fallen creatures did not simply collapse, they disintegrated into fine particulate that swirled like black snow, drawn inexorably toward the fisher's core, where it seemed to feed the growing maw. Eric moved beside him, a living bulwark. His carbine spat bolts of plasma that left afterimages of searing light, each strike carving a trench through the horde. When a particularly massive abomination, its torso a fused lattice of bone and obsidian plating, lunged, Eric sidestepped, his boot catching the edge of a broken column and propelling him into a spinning kick that shattered the creature's sternum. The impact sent a shockwave through the bone, cracking it outward like a shattered vase, and the creature staggered, giving Kale the opening to put a round through its throat. The whispers crescendoed into a scream that seemed to originate from within their own skulls, a psychic pressure that threatened to fracture thought itself. Kale felt his vision narrow, the edges of his field of view darkening as the tomb's influence clawed at his psyche. He clenched his jaw, the pain sharp and grounding, and forced his mind to focus on the tactile. The weight of his rifle, the recoil against his shoulder, the grit under his fingernails, the smell of burnt plasma and ozone. Each sensation was an anchor, a reminder that he was still flesh and blood, still human. Vera's voice, strained but fierce, cut through the mental fog. Keep your eyes on the beacon, don't let them get inside your head, focus on the light. She flicked a switch on her wrist-mounted comm, boosting the signal to the beacon, causing it to flare brighter for a heartbeat before the tomb's interference tried to swallow it again. The blue pulse throbbed like a heart, a stubborn defiance against the encroaching darkness. Juno's cannon roared one final time, the barrel overheating as she dumped the last of her coolant reserves into a concentrated burst that swept across the western flank, turning a swathe of attackers into a river of molten slag that poured down the fisher's throat. The sound was deafening, a deep, resonant boom that seemed to make the stone itself shudder. She slumped against the column, breathing ragged, her arms trembling, but her eyes never left the battlefield. Eric barked, his voice hoarse from the effort of shouting over the noise. Fall back to the shaft. Now he moved with a lethal efficiency, laying down suppressing fire as he retreated, his carbine's muzzle flash painting intermittent stripes of crimson light across the walls. Kale fell back in step, his boots slipping on the slick film of ash and molten rock that coated the floor, each step a battle against gravity and the tug of the unseen. The fissure widened, a yawning maw that threatened to consume the entire chamber. Tendrils of violet-black light lashed out like whips, seeking to ensnare anything that dared to approach. One such tendril snapped toward Kale's ankle, the tip brushing his boot and sending a jolt of cold fire up his leg. He gasped, the pain sharp and electric, and twisted away, his rifle firing a spray of rounds that severed the tendril mid-air, the fragments scattering like shards of obsidian. They reached the shaft's mouth just as the first tremor of the tomb's collapse hit, a low, resonant groan that reverberated through the stone like the death rattle of a leviathan. Dust and debris rained down, striking their helmets with muffled thuds. The beacon's light flared brighter, now steady, as if responding to their proximity, casting a stark blue-white rectangle onto the shaft's lip. Eric shoved Kale forward, his gauntleted hand firm on his shoulder. Move, move. Move, he bellowed, the command echoing off the walls as if the stone itself were urging them onward. Vera followed, her plasma cannon still humming with residual energy, scanning the darkness for any lurking threat. Juno dragged herself behind them, each step a testament to sheer will, her cannon now a dead weight she bore like a shield. The shaft itself was a narrow throat of reinforced alloy, its interior lined with magnetic rails designed to guide the dropship's tether. As they entered, the air changed, cooler, filtered, carrying the faint tang of recycled oxygen from the dropship's life support. The walls vibrated faintly with the distant thrum of the ship's engines growing louder, a sound that promised salvation. Just as they cleared the threshold, the fissure erupted in a cataclysmic pulse. A wave of pure violet-black energy surged outward, licking at the shaft's entrance like a flame seeking to consume a moth. The force slammed into the alloy doors, denting them inward, sending a shower of sparks and molten metal spraying across the threshold. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold its breath, the whispers rising to a deafening crescendo that threatened to shatter minds. Kale's vision blurred at the edges, the psychic assault threatening to overwhelm him. He felt the tug of the void, a seductive promise of oblivion that whispered of peace, of an end to the relentless fight. Images flashed his homeworld sunrise, the faces of fallen comrades, the cold vacuum of space, each a fragment of life he clung to with desperate ferocity. He forced his eyes open, locking onto the beacon's steady blue light, the symbol of hope amidst the chaos. Eric roared, his voice a raw, animalistic bellow that cut through the psychic storm. Hold the line. Don't you dare let it take you. He planted his feet bracing against the shuddering shaft, his carmine-tinted visor reflecting the chaotic light outside as he sprayed suppressing fire into the maw, each bolt of plasma a defiant scream against the encroaching dark. Vera's plasma cannon flared, a searing arc that lanced into the heart of the pulse, destabilizing it for a fraction of a second. The fissure sputtered, the violet-black light flickering as if choking on its own energy. Juno, despite her exhaustion, managed to swing her cannon's barrel toward the swelling void, firing a final, desperate salvo that struck the center of the surge. The impact sent a shockwave of coherent energy rippling outward, the fissure contracting with a sound like a tearing seam of reality. The pulse recoiled, snapping back into the stone with a final anguished howl that seemed to echo from the depths of the tomb itself. The walls shuddered, dust cascading from the ceiling in a slow, grisly rain. The whispers faded, their voices dwindling to a hollow murmur that was quickly swallowed by the returning silence, or rather, the relative silence of the dropship's approach. The roar of the dropship's engines grew, a deep, thunderous thrum that vibrated through the shaft's metal ribs. Lights flickered on along the interior, casting a harsh white glow that revealed the grim tableau. The squad, battered and bleeding, ash coating their visors, scorches marking their armor, eyes wide with a mixture of relief and lingering dread. Eric lowered his weapon, breathing hard, the adrenaline draining away in waves that left him shaking. Echo 6, this is Ash Leader. We are inside the shaft. Extraction, repeat, extraction is go. His voice, though fatigued, carried the weight of command that had not faltered. Kale slumped against the wall, the rifle slipping from his grasp to clatter against the metal floor. He stared at his hands, gloved, smeared with black ash and dried blood, and felt the tremor in his fingers fade slowly. The void's whisper was gone, replaced by the steady, mechanical hum of the dropship's docking clamps engaging. A soft hiss signaled the pressurization equalizing, and the shaft's outer doors began to grind open, revealing the bay of the dropship beyond, a cavernous interior lit by emergency strips, medics already moving toward the open ramp. Medics in stark white armor rushed forward, their scanners beeping as they assessed the first to check vitals. One knelt beside Kale, a female medic with a visor darkened against the glare, her voice calm but urgent. "You're with us, soldier, stay with me." She placed a hand on his shoulder, the contact warm and grounding, and began to administer analgesic that seeped into his bloodstream, dulling the ache that had settled deep in his bones. Vera, her plasma cannon now cool, leaned against the opposite wall, her chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. She watched as the medics worked, her eyes scanning the shadows beyond the ramp for any sign of residual threat, any lingering tendril of the void that might have slipped through the cracks. Nothing stirred but the steady pulse of the dropship's power core and the distant, fading echo of the tomb's last gasp. Juno, barely able to stand, was helped onto a stretcher, her cannon strapped securely to the frame. She glanced back at the shaft's entrance, where the fissure now lay dormant, a scar of blackened stone that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. A faint, almost imperceptible vibration lingered in the air, a reminder that the tomb was not truly dead, only dormant, waiting for the next foolish soul to pry open its seal. As the dropship's ramp lowered fully, a flood of cool, recycled air washed over them, carrying the faint scent of antifreeze and ozone. The squad was ushered aboard, each step a laborious shuffle against the pull of gravity and the weight of what they had endured. Inside, the cabin was dim, the only illumination coming from the strips along the ceiling and the soft glow of the medics' consoles. Straps clicked into place, securing them as the vessel prepared for ascent. The hatch sealed with a soft hiss, and the dropship lurched forward, breaking free of the shaft's confines. The exterior view through the viewport showed the tomb's entrance receding, the fissure now a dark wound in the cliffside, the pulsing light gone, replaced by a cold, inert stone face. The whispers, if they remained, were drowned out by the roar of the engines and the steady thrum of the ship's ascent through the atmosphere. Cale leaned his head back against the headrest, his eyes closing briefly as the vibrations of the ship's climb settled into a rhythmic thrum. In the darkness behind his lids, he saw not the void's promise of oblivion, but the faces of his squad, Eric's stern jaw, Vera's fierce gaze, Juno's grim set of jaw, and felt, despite the exhaustion, a fierce ember of defiance still burning. They had stared into the maw of eternity and for now had walked away. The dropship pierced the upper stratosphere, the sky outside shifting from the bruised twilight of the tomb's surroundings to the deep, star-spangled black of space. Distant lights of the ASF fleet glittered like cold sentinels on the horizon, a silent promise that the fight was far from over, but that they, at least for tonight, were no longer prey to the whispers of the void.